international community. Today we have a panel of distinguished persons of note in Guyana. There are many things they have in common, and I will introduce them to you now. The format for this presentation will be that each panelist will present to you for 5 to 7 minutes, and then the floor will be open to you for you to ask any question that you may wish to have clarification on. Nothing is too difficult. Nothing is off limits. Ask and it shall be answered. We have with us this afternoon Mr. Anil, Mohabir Anil Nandlall, Senior Counsel and Member of Parliament. He is our country's Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs and is a prominent figure, as you know, in our Guyanese politics. He's known for his eloquence and legal expertise. Mr. Nandlall has made significant contributions to the development of Guyana's legal system, and he plays a crucial role in shaping legislation and advocating for justice. Mr. Nandlall's dedication to public service and his commitment to upholding the rule of law have earned him respect and recognition both nationally and internationally. I give you Mr. Anil Nandlall. Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan is a prominent opposition politician, Member of Parliament, and attorney at law of over 3 decades. He's known for his dedication to public service and his contributions to the political and legal landscape of Guyana. As a former Minister of Public Security and Vice President of the APNU-AFC government, Mr. Ramjatan has played a crucial role in shaping policies related to crime, security, and governance in our dear Guyana. I give you Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan. And amongst the thorns, we have a rose. Dr. Kim Kite John is a highly accomplished attorney at law in Guyana, known for her expertise and dedication to the legal profession. With her extensive knowledge and experience, she has made a significant impacts in our country with her clients. She just departed as the distinguished office of Head of Department of Law at the University of Guyana and is currently a commissioner on the Presidential Commission of Inquiry into the Madhya fire. Perhaps most importantly, Dr. Kim Kite John is a mother of many. I give you Dr. Kim Kite John. These, ladies and gentlemen, students, are your distinguished panelists for this afternoon's most important discussion. We will begin, and I invite Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan to begin the presentations. Kemraj. Okay.
Thank you so much, Priya, Honorable Minister, and I'm glad to be in company with Anil and of course Ms. Kim Kite. But I'm rather pleased this afternoon to be with you, very bright kids from Queen's College, our premier institution, although Ms. Kim Kite might want to argue with me and say President's College is the numero uno. But my short little address to you here is to speak on some historical facts concerning this Venezuela dispute. And it has to do with history. Of course, if we do not clear up what transpired in history, We are not going to understand what is the present, neither are we going to understand what ought to be the future. And of course, we know our history. We were initially British Guyana. As a matter of fact, prior to being British Guyana, we were owned by the Dutch. All three counties then, Demerara, Essequibo, and Berbice, for a long period of time. In the 1800s. And thereafter, we saw the Dutch and the English fighting over this territory, and the British then took it over sometime in 1800. What transpired between the British and Venezuela, because Venezuela, through a freedom fighter called Simon Bolivar, had managed to gain independence since 1811. And they had started a battle with Spain, which they won, just like how America had started a battle with Britain, and they had won to become United States of America. It is important to understand that after a battle, Britain won these three counties against the Dutch, and then as a result of that, we had a conflict between Venezuela and the United Kingdom then, who had colonized British Guyana. And what is also important is that properly managed fences makes better neighbors. If we could align our boundaries in accordance with that which belongs to us and which belongs to the others, we are going to get to be good neighbors. And what happened in 1899 was a resolution of the problem as to where Guyana's western boundary is, and that was via an arbitral award whereby Venezuela appointed two members of the arbitration team. Britain awarded two members, Britain appointed two members, and those four members then appointed a chairperson, constitutive then of 5 members. And after a long period of addressing the issue, and these were very brilliant men of the law and international law, they then indicated that a certain boundary based on bearing spots is the actual boundary which now exists as of today. After coming to that award, Venezuela at that point in time accepted it, and they even helped to appoint a team of surveyors who by 1905 then delineated that border from Point Playa right down to Roraima as we now know it. Venezuela was happy, Britain was happy, and that was 1905, and we hardly had any problems in that border because everybody was happy. As a matter of fact, Britain had wanted the border to even go further west to Orinoco. But the team of surveyors and the arbitral team had indicated where it now exists is satisfactory. Venezuela happy, Britain happy, and of course we did not gain independence until 1966. And around the time when independence was now to be gained and Guyana would be the country, and a young set of politicians in Burnham and Jagan and a number of others, they're going to be in charge of Guyana, Venezuela started up the heat because it knew that it could not deal with Britain. Britain was a powerful country those days, but it now realized that it could take advantage of Guyana. And so it started what is called saber rattling and saying that a number of things, one of which I should mention to you, is that a certain lawyer in that 1899 tribunal award, some 44 or 47 years later, had indicated that there was some fraud committed by Britain. And his words to that effect were only out after he had died, 6 months after he had died, sometime in 1947, I think it was. That is the basis now that Venezuela in 1960s started indicating that that award of 1899 was, let's call it fraudulent, to be simple. And they started knowing very well that Guyana, small independent country, almost 8 times or 10 times smaller, can be taken advantage of. And around that time too, we had noticed Venezuela via a number of its presidents thereafter indicating that Essequibo belongs to them. A totally ludicrous position to take, knowing very well that indeed that's not true. And around 1966, upon gaining independence, the pressure was so much in Guyana, after they started their saber rattling and all of that, they indicated that they would like a means to address this issue as to whether that award of 1899 was final and perfect because of this allegation brought by the lawyer for the award. It has absolutely no merit, but in 1966, just before gaining independence, the then government of Guyana, he was in 1964 elected Prime Minister Forbes Burnham, signed on with Venezuela an agreement called the Geneva Agreement, that yes, indeed, we are going to work out an arrangement to solve that problem. It was not to renege on the 1899 award. It was to investigate whether indeed this allegation of fraud alleged by the lawyer had any merits in it. That's the point about it all, as to whether that allegation had any merits to it. And I just want to simplify it for you. And the process started whereby a mixed commission made up of Guyanese and Venezuelans were supposed to ensure that they can bring this matter to an end. Venezuela maintained and started misinterpreting that Geneva Agreement to give the impression that it was an agreement that is literally voiding the 1899 award. It was not that at all. Inside of that Geneva Agreement had certain aspects about it that if you cannot agree, the Secretary General of the United Nations can refer it to the ICJ for resolution. Now, Venezuela is a member of the United Nations Charter and a signatory. Venezuela is also, by virtue of being a member of the United Nations and a signatory to the Charter, also a member of the ICJ, ipso facto. By being a member of the United Nations, you automatically become a member of the ICJ. And for years thereafter, right up to 2017, there was no settlement of this issue as to whether that claim had any merit about it. And in the Geneva Agreement, a certain article said that the Secretary General can then decide on the issue as to whether it be taken to the ICJ. In 2018, it was so taken to the ICJ. And of course, I will leave it there for Mr. Nandlall or my good friend. Well, I think it is Mr. Nandlall to take it from there as to the history of it. And I, of course, will be welcoming any questions that you have in relation to the history and also the politics of it. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon to all of you, and also to those persons who are joining us on social media. I want to thank the Honorable Minister for this invitation. I'm happy to be in your presence. I must, it would be remiss of me if I do not recognize the fact that students from my alma mater, they're here from the President's College. And so I want to also greet you. Now, I want to thank my dear friend and colleague, Kemraj, for giving us a historical overview, because it allows me to really focus on what has been Guyana's response to what we see as Venezuela's response, conduct, what I would call approach to the 1899 award. So Kemraj took us through the different phases and the agreement which the United Kingdom had with Venezuela. He took us through the fact that even after that, there was a signing in 1966 Geneva agreement. So he has given us that type of overview. Guyana, at every stage, I want to make this clear to you students, Guyana at every single stage has utilized lawful means, has utilized the protocols, the organs within the United Nations to resolve this matter. At every means we have, at every stage, we have conducted ourselves. We have, within the parameters, within the boundaries of international law, international protocol, international norms. I want us to recognize that. You may ask yourself, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, one, we have continually respected the 1899 award. That award, I want to point to some words. It was determined then to be a full, perfect, and final settlement. And when you hear that, you ask yourself, so why are we here? Why are we here in 2023 still considering an award which was determined, which was found, which was agreed to be a full, perfect, and final settlement? I'm sure you're asking yourself that. And that is on the minds and in the hearts of every Guyanese. It has a lot to do with the fact that our neighbor, as Kemraj pointed out, almost 60 years after this award, commenced an attempt to renegotiate and to treat that award as not a full, perfect, and final settlement. Again, what did Guyana do? What did Guyana do? Guyana entered into the Geneva Agreement with our neighbor to ensure that the processes, the mechanisms within the ambit of international law can be utilized to resolve this controversy which was coming from our neighbor. Not to renegotiate the terms and the clauses and the finding of that award. It was to put into effect, and you are brilliant students. Brilliant. Some of you within a year or two may become my students. And so I know that you can pull up that Geneva Agreement, to look to see what was the purpose of that Geneva Agreement. It was to put into effect the practical effect of the award. Again, the Commission, as my dear friend pointed out, it was not resolved there. Ask yourself, what did Guyana do? Guyana then utilized the lawful mechanisms which what Guyana did was provided for by that Geneva 1966 award. If there was no resolution, what would be the course? So we approached the Secretary General to identify the means, the mechanisms by which we can resolve it. The ICJ was then identified. And what did we do as a peaceful people? We then approached the International Court to ask the court, again, not to renegotiate the 1899 award, but to do what? To reaffirm it. And I think this is something, as Guyanese, we must all understand. We are there to reaffirm that 1899 award. And so, students, even as we fast forward to 2023, and we notice that our neighbor has called for a referendum, and Venezuela is a sovereign state, our concern has to do with the effects of that referendum and whether it will in any way breach our sovereignty and our territorial rights. And so you will see that the Venezuelan people are asked to reject the 1899 award. So again, I want you to do a comparison. You have one nation utilizing lawful means. You have another nation which is calling for, one, to reject the arbitral award, to reject the jurisdiction of the court, and to formally annex. So there is a call for the people of Venezuela to give the government permission to annex that state possession of Essequibo and to give Guyanese Venezuelan citizenship and national identity, and to develop the Essequibo as a state of Venezuela. I want you to compare the two positions. Compare our response and compare Venezuela's response. And that is why we are here, because there has been a refusal by our neighbor to honor what is a full, final, perfect settlement of a territorial dispute. I wish to encourage you, even whatever may be your sphere of influence, Guyana has all times utilized lawful means, utilized the lawful recourse of the organs of international law, and we at all times have indicated to our neighbor and the international community that we want what? A peaceful resolution. I, from where I sit, don't think it's too late that we could have a peaceful resolution of this matter. So let us try to educate everyone around us as to exactly what is going on. Guyana has not done anything wrong. Guyana has not sought to annex anybody's territory. All we are doing is that we are attempting to protect our Essequibo, because Essequibo is we own. I thank you.
Madam Moderator, the Honorable Minister of Education, my esteemed colleagues on stage, I want to recognize Member of Parliament Ganesh Mahipal, teachers, and most importantly, the students who are gathered here. First of all, permit me to thank the ministry, the minister, and the teachers and organizers of this event, and to thank you, the children, for affording us this opportunity and for dedicating your afternoon to listen to us. Perhaps since the birth of our country as a nation state on the 26th of May, 1966, this is the most important threat that we have ever faced thus far in our nationhood's history. Our country is under an existential threat, where our western neighbor, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, is asserting a claim to take over by annexure or by invasion more than 5/8 of what we know and what the law says is the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. It is as if the house that you know that your parents own, that you know that is yours and will be yours, and that you know that will be your children's and your children's children's, somebody, your neighbor, all of a sudden comes forward and says, I am going to take more than 2/3 of this house away from you. That is what we and Guyana is confronted by. So it is imperative that each and every one of you understand the core and principal facts of this matter, its historical evolution, and how it will unfold in the near future. We simply don't have the luxury of an alternative recourse. We have to understand these facts. And that is what is responsible for this and the many, many more engagements that will unfold over the next few days, weeks, and months. My colleague, Kamraj Ramjatan, and Dr. Kim Kite have done an excellent job in laying the foundation. And it's not my intention to travel that path all over again, but to just highlight a few things that I believe should be emphasized, and to highlight a couple of facts that I hope will stick with you, because the narrative is a long one. It began in 1786, and it is up to now, 2023. A lot of time and a lot of information that we have to cover in very limited time. But you must understand a couple of things. Firstly, Guyana stands on the side of the rule of law. We stand on the side of justice. We stand on the side of international norm. We stand on the side of international conventions and practices. We stand on the side of peace, global peace, and we stand on the side of international diplomacy. All those central concepts to a modern civilized world are on Guyana's side. And that is why we enjoy hemispheric support, global support on this matter. Very few countries have come out in support of Venezuela. The United Nations, the largest international organization in the world, is on our side. All the major institutions of this hemisphere are on our side. The Commonwealth is on our side. The Organization of American States is on our side. The CARICOM is on our side. Many countries, or most countries, on the South American continent and in Latin America are on our side. There must be a reason why. The reason is because we are on the righteous side. Why we are on the righteous side? It is Venezuela in 1906. They had just gotten independence from Spain, and they went to the United States of America to complain that the UK government at the time, the great colonial British Empire, was taking advantage of them as a newly born independent state and was taking in part of their territory in the form of British Guyana. America at the time, and many of you are history students, and you would have done the topic US in the Caribbean, so you know about the doctrines that were furtherance, that were conceived and designed to further American hegemony. Doctrines like the Monroe Doctrines, the Manifest Destiny, the Roosevelt Corollary, the Big Stick policies. Well, at that epoch of the history, it was the Monroe Doctrine, where America has declared this hemisphere to be their sphere of influence. And they were exercising this policing role. And that is the basis upon which Venezuela went to them to complain against this big, bad powerful British Empire. So they instigated this issue. Then they sat with the Americans and they sat with the British government and they worked out the terms by which this dispute will be resolved. They work out the terms of reference and they agreed to the mechanism in the form of an arbitral tribunal that will resolve this dispute. They also participated actively in how this tribunal will be constituted. Venezuela sat at that table at every aspect of those foundational discussions and preparatory steps. They signed an agreement as an independent country that whatever is the outcome of this arbitral award, they will be bound by it. Now, some of you are doing A-level law and you know about contracts. An arbitration is simply a contract, and you are required by the very nature of an arbitration to sign, to say that whatever is the outcome, because you have submitted yourself to it, because you have chosen the arbitrators, you are bound by it. And Venezuela signed on to that. The arbitration came and went, and the award was made. Venezuela accepted the award and celebrated the award. And they celebrated it for good cause and with good reason. Why? Because under the award, they got a landmass that was more than 5 times the size of Guyana. What we know as Guyana now, they got from the award 5 times the size of this landmass. When the British brought their surveyor to mark out the boundary, British Guyana's boundary was way up the Orinoco Basin, almost touching Caracas. All of that, they won under the award. And with great justification, they claimed and proclaimed victory. They hurriedly went and they demarcated the boundaries in 1905. Boundaries that included boundaries with Brazil and British Guyana. Then they went to their parliament and they passed laws in their country recognizing and delineating those boundaries as Venezuela and Venezuelan boundaries. And for 60 years after that, they faithfully complied with that arbitral award. Never raised an objection whatsoever. As we were getting independence, as we were approaching our journey for independence from Great Britain, in 1962, for the first time, they registered a protest at the United Nations General Assembly. The first protest, they said, they're only challenging the award on moral grounds. Not legal grounds, they said moral grounds. And then shortly thereafter, as we were approaching independence, they began to intensify their claim at the UN, and they changed from moral to a legal objection. By that time, we were very close to independence. And it was felt by the British that, you know what, it may be unsafe to grant independence to Guyana, newly born country, and this mighty Venezuela next door is asserting this gigantic territorial claim against this newly born country. So let us try to find a mechanism that will keep the parties at bay. The British officers who negotiated that agreement that was crystallized in Geneva in 1966, which we commonly call the Geneva Agreement, were very, very clear that that agreement was never intended to investigate, interrogate, or challenge the arbitral award, because that was settled, that was bound up, that was acted upon by all parties. But Venezuela keep making these assertions, and the Geneva Agreement was entered into as a mechanism and to provide a forum for the settlement by peaceful means of Venezuela's allegation without reopening the entire dispute all over again. And that is the reason why in our language, in our expression, we must not say that there is a dispute, because there is none. And that is why we are using the language of a controversy. So after the 1966 Geneva Agreement, that agreement now outlines a series of processes that the two governments can activate, and they have activated them from 1966 up to now. So you had a mixed commission, then you had a mechanism called a good office, and by those mechanisms allowed, under the supervision of the United Nations, to allow Venezuela and Guyana and others who sat as mediators to sit around the table from 1966 to now for Venezuela to produce the evidence that it has to establish this alleged fraud that it claims took place in relation to the arbitral award. And from 1966 to now, the moment that I'm speaking to you, they have been unable to produce a shred of credible evidence to support that allegation. Not one scintilla of evidence has been produced by Venezuela. So, all the talks have proven futile. They have not yielded any success. And all these talks and all these engagements are what are provided for under the Geneva Agreement. Well, when everything failed in 2017, we went back to the UN General Assembly, as is provided for by the Geneva Agreement, to say, Mr. Secretary General, all the other avenues that we have used have failed. And the agreement says when that happens, we must come back to you and you must recommend what is the alternative course. And the UN Secretary General, in the exercise of his powers given to him in the Geneva Agreement by the government of Venezuela and by the government of Guyana, says that the matter must go to the UN court, which is the International Court of Justice, for resolution. And that is where we are. Now you hear that narrative. We are not at fault in any manner whatsoever. When we reach to the court now, we file our proceedings in 2017, Venezuela recognizes that they don't have a case. That the same thing that they have been saying since 1966 and before, they are unable to prove it even in an informal setting. How can they prove it in a court of law? So, many of you may want to be lawyers. The first thing that a person who gets sued, once he knows that he doesn't have a case, is to try to squirm out, try to get away from the court proceedings. So Venezuela went to the court and says, court, you have no jurisdiction over me. And the court fixed a date and a time for us to deal exclusively with jurisdiction. And you know what the court told them? The court said, listen to me. From 1966, you signed the Geneva Agreement. You participated in all the procedures outlined in the Geneva Agreement. It's the Geneva Agreement that you signed that says that when those protocols fail, you must come to the UN and the UN can recommend the court. And the UN has recommended the court. So how can you come here and say you don't have jurisdiction? It is your trigger and authority that has caused me, the court, to be activated. So the court rejected them. We filed our claim, and they are to file what is called loosely their defense, or what is called their counter memorial. The time has gone for them to do that, and they have failed to do it. You know why? because they cannot put anything sensible down on paper. You see, it is easy to put on a soldier uniform and to put on a fancy suit and speak loosely and speak recklessly and arrogantly. But when you are before a tribunal, especially a tribunal of law, and you have to put down things intelligently, and not you got to do it, you got to hire lawyers to do it. And these lawyers will not make a clown of themselves because they have their reputation to protect. Matters become complicated. So they can't present their case. And they have 30 lawyers that they're walking around with. So what is it? So they have problems in Venezuela. They have election problems. You have all this migration that you all know about. Every corner in Georgetown selling a Venezuelan burger. So you know what's going on in Venezuela. Backed against the wall and facing an election, the only thing redeeming for that government is to invoke this 200-year-old zombie, this border matter, to garner patriotic sentiments and nationalistic fervor. And that is what they have been doing. So they planned this referendum that we hear about on the 5th. And they ask a couple of questions. And those questions will involve them doing all kinds of things that will interfere with our territorial integrity. And that is why they are still before the court. So we have gone to the court and we have said to the court, look, this issue is before you for dispute, for determination. And here it is, Venezuela, who is a party to this dispute, whom you have said already you have jurisdiction over, and whom you have ordered to file their defense in defiance of your process and in defiance of your order, is now saying that, look, they're going to take a step in their country or participate in a process in their country that will almost collide with the legal proceedings, will almost defeat the legal proceedings. And we are asking the court to grant such remedies that will protect Guyana's interest in relation to that planned activity. As I've said elsewhere, we are not going to the court to stop a referendum from taking place in Venezuela, a constitutional process that they are authorized to do. Every country has a right to hold a referendum, but no country has a right to hold a referendum that will result in actions that will cause interference with the territorial integrity of another country. And insofar as that referendum seeks to galvanize and result in that type of consequences, we say to the court, we need your protection. And that is where we are with the court. We are to receive a ruling very shortly, and hopefully before the 3rd of December, because the 3rd of December is the planned referendum. So I'll leave the matter there now. I believe that I have covered what I wanted to cover, and to put the matter into perspective and to add to what was so carefully outlined by my previous speakers, so that you now have a comprehensive understanding of the facts and the legal history and the legal status of where we are on this matter. So I will ask to take your leave now, and let's begin the question period. Thank you very much.
Kemraj Ramchatan, Kim Kite Thomas, Mohabir Anil Nandlall, we thank you. You heard here words we do not use. It's not a dispute. It's not a conflict. It's not a border issue. You heard here how even before we became an independent nation in 1899, this border was settled. You heard here that when we were going to become an independent nation, Venezuela then decided to raise the issue again. You heard how England entered into an agreement with them that again settled the issue. And you heard how subsequently, from then to now, although we've been friends in many regards and have engaged with each other as countries in many regards, that the issue has remained a long-standing one that has evolved. You heard how, when unfortunately Venezuela began to face problems internally, and their people began to flee for safety and for preservation, that perhaps politicians there believed that it would be distracting to their own local harsh circumstances to raise this issue that was settled before, and how they plan a referendum on the 3rd, which is a large vote seeking particular direction. You heard how Guyana never backed down, ever, and how Guyana's people, opposition and government, and regardless of ethnicity and religion and gender and social class, how Guyana and her people always stood up in defense of our lands, always stood up reinforcing our rights. We don't believe we have an issue. We don't believe we have a dispute. We believe Venezuela is quarreling by herself, and we are hearing it, so we are responding. And how we have always used the legal procedures, the civilized way of addressing issues, how we have gone to the ICJ to say, here we have this quarrel happening again, could you help us? And we refuse to bow and be bullied, and we're asking you for orders to stop any implementation of any position that might be taken at this referendum. I am sure today you stand here in this room proud of your country, proud of your ancestors, and proud of yourself for standing up for what is ours, what has always been ours. Essequibo is we own. Today, even as you are here in this room, we have with us 2 schools, and I want to, on behalf of you, warm Queen's College students, welcome the Christianberg Wismer Secondary School from Linden, and President's College from the East Coast. And from across the country, 14 schools who are currently in their smart classrooms, something that did not exist when I came into office in 2020, watching and joining you in this national and important discussion. These schools are Johanna Cecilia Secondary, Abram Zul Secondary, Shortville Secondary, Westminster Secondary, Good Hope Secondary, Christian Wisba Secondary, North Ramveld Secondary, Port Moran Secondary, Skeldon High, Skeldon Line Path Secondary, Baijaval Secondary, Fort Wellington Secondary, Anna Regina Secondary, and Santa Rosa Secondary, all the way in Region 1. I want you to also know that through the Guyana Learning Channel, which again was expanded, communities across the country currently 85% of our hinterland communities are accessing this live program. And I want you to know that EduFM, our radio station, again something new, is broadcasting as we speak to our border communities and our coastline communities. So this is where we come to the exciting part. The panelists tell me they're afraid of you, slightly. They tell me they're worried about the kinds of questions you're going to ask, given what they believe you are capable of, not only here at Queen's College, but those of you online. And they're ready to take and answer any question you have. So please do not hesitate to ask them. The panelists will sit where they are and take your questions with 2 microphones that are before them. You will also hear their answers because we are connected. So I will begin by asking you to stand so we can bring you a microphone if you have a question for any or all of the panelists. Yes, are we seeing a hand up? Sir, look over there. So these are the 6 formers, yes. And if I really need to have your I'm just told that Port Moran Secondary is also connected and watching. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, my esteemed panelists. So earlier, I believe all 3 of you were saying that CARICOM is backing you as well as the Organization of American States. That's correct? So my question is, how can regional organizations such as those contribute to the resolution of the Guyana-Venezuela border issue?
So the question is, how can organizations like CARICOM and the UN contribute to the resolution of this border issue, of this controversy?
Testing. They can help by making statements in those organizations, in my opinion, denouncing what Venezuela is doing. It is important to understand the ridiculous nature of the claim that Venezuela is making, and since all these organizations are adherents to the rule of law, they can, at the very commencement or the very first step, start the process of stating that Venezuela, you're wrong to do what you're doing. And also in that same breath, indicating that Guyana, you are right, we support you, and we are going to await the outcome of the decision of the ICJ on the substantive matter, which is there, and also on the provisional matters that have arisen. I think that's a good start for these organizations, and to be emphatic about it, categorical about it, about our about Venezuela's claim and our support for us. I think that's a good start to what they can do for Guyana.
All right, I totally agree with Kemraj. I think it is important, very important, that the international organizations and countries show clearly their support behind Guyana and signal to Venezuela that you should wait on the ruling of the court. This is a lawful mechanism. This is a lawful means. Guyana at every stage has engaged you in the lawful sphere wait on the ruling of the court, and to perhaps also signal to them, at the same time, we are back in Guyana. If this goes in a particular direction, which we don't want it to go in, Guyana has our support. I think it is important that there is clarity in statements, clarity in comments, clarity at press conferences, that we are standing by Guyana, because everyone could see at every stage we have utilized the lawful means. That is why we before the ICJ. And we're not sitting at home running around in military uniforms and proclaiming we are prepared to take any territory by unlawful means. So where I thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. And I believe, clarity, that will go a long, long, long.
So, I agree with my two learned friends, but you see, most of the world consists of what is called sovereign nations, independent territories. And part of sovereignty is the power to chart your own destiny, to determine your own future, to settle disputes your own way. Because, you're a big man. You're your own country. You can't operate at the dictate of another. You're no longer a dependent. You're no longer a colony. You're no longer a protectorate. You are a sovereign state. Now imagine a world where all sovereign states choose to exercise their sovereignty and everyone begin to do their own thing. There would be a global collapse. If every one of you in this room decide that you will speak at the same time, or you will stand at the same time, or you will do something different on your own volition, there will be chaos in this room. Translate that internationally. If every country decides to take their matters into their own hands, then there will be chaos globally. In order to resolve that international dilemma, sovereign nations signed a pact called the United Nations Charter, by which they agree to bind themselves to international norms, to international law, and to certain provisions of the Charter. Venezuela is a member of that Charter. It's a member of the United Nations. The Charter says that if you have disputes, you have to go to the International Court of Justice, which is the principal judicial arm of the United Nations. So what is happening here is Venezuela is behaving as a rogue state. It is breaking away all international law, all international norm. It is throwing international diplomacy aside, and it wants to prosecute its own selfish agenda. That is not permissible on the international stage. And when countries in CARICOM and the OAS speak to Venezuela, they are not speaking as though they are asking Venezuela a favor. They are in essence saying to Venezuela, hello, you are a sovereign nation just like me. And you have given an undertaking to the world that though you are sovereign, you will govern your affairs for the common good, the world good, which is to comply with international law. Your question specifically as it relates to the United Nations, as I indicated from the podium, it is the United Nations that is in charge of this matter. Under the Geneva Agreement signed by Venezuela and Guyana, we have given the matter over. to the United Nations. And it is the United Nations that has recommended it to the International Court of Justice. So the United Nations is integrally involved. It is their processes that have been activated. Thank you.
So I would invite you all to check out for yourselves before the end of this afternoon what are the countries that make up the United Nations, how many, and what was their sole purpose for forming themselves as an institution across the world. That is the UN. We'll take the second question.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel. Good afternoon, everyone listening. My question is, how has the ongoing territorial dispute between Guyana and Venezuela impacted both politically and economic stability of both countries?
How has the ongoing territorial dispute between Guyana and Venezuela impacted the political and economic stability of both countries? So I'll reform it to say, remember, we don't have a dispute, but how has the controversy impacted the political and economic stability of Guyana and Venezuela? That's his question.
It has impacted it, and I'm speaking here for Guyana, in a most negative way. Since 1960s, 62 to be specific, and then after, you hearing me?
Yeah.
Yes. Investments in Essequibo have literally been nil. There was a huge investment that an American firm had wanted to come to commence here in Essequibo. It was called the Beale Aerospace deal, and by virtue of that project, we were supposed to send up satellites by rockets in Essequibo because it is near to the equator, and for certain scientific reasons, it was about the best area. I understand some people went to French Guyana. They have gotten that project going there. But that would have made Guyana economically richer for a big company like Beale Aerospace coming in. There was also investments that were blocked as a result of what Venezuela was doing from a West German company called Dimitrex. A huge set of other projects that even Guyana wanted to do and had asked the World Bank for about $200 million US at that time was the setting up of the Upper Mazaruni hydro project. Years ago, Venezuela set up letters to the World Bank director stating that they must not lend monies to Guyana to do that project because Essequibo, they will take it over, as it were. And so it has had what is called a negative effect in that regard. But generally too, the entire region, as a result of the tensions created by Venezuela on this issue, has caused people to back away from even going to live there. As we see today, a number of businessmen are taking planes to come out of that area. And they're driving a lot of fear in Guyanese. So it is important to understand it's a whole series of negatives. Even some of the fishing agreements that were granted by previous governments to certain fishing associations, international, very big fishing arrangements, the people have literally backed away because Venezuela might very well want to seize their ships as they have seized ships before. And that is the negatives to it all. And of course, lots more implications of that kind of tension. And it is not a nice thing. We want peace, and that kind of peace that we want will bring in a lot of investors into that area, and we can even populate it more with families and workers for these companies that will want to go there. Thank you.
I want to look at it from another angle. Those of you who are following, and you would have been following what's happening in Venezuela. Venezuela has been in economic, financial crisis for a while now. That is why we have such an influx of Venezuelans coming over to Guyana. And that is because Guyana is in an upward trajectory in terms of our oil and gas industry and the development processes which are in place and which we have noticed happening. So when you compare the two countries, you see a country in financial and economic crisis and another country that is growing and improving. Venezuela is simply exploiting the situation. And I shouldn't say Venezuela. The present leadership. They're in economic crisis. The election is impending. And this is an attempt to either distract the nation from the reality of their situation. Economically, they're in crisis. And so the citizens are fleeing. And as a result, I don't believe they care what impact it will have on Guyana. And if you notice, when Exxon, so there's always this attempt to push off investors from Guyana. They see where we are going. They see our future is bright. And so through bullyism and aggression, they try to push our investors away. And that is something we have to be cognizant of. Where they are heading as compared to where we are going economically. And I believe it is an attempt to exploit this situation somehow for their benefit. I was sharing with somebody the other day, if you can't manage what you have, why you want to come and try to manage what we have? You have failed in that respect. And now you want to include us in your downward movement. So, you know, that is something I believe we have to look at when we are dealing with this situation.
So as we heard, this border issue is not new. It has predated our independence. The first assertion, as I said, was made in 1962. And from since then, it has been hovering over us. So why then? Oh, and President Maduro's immediate predecessor, President Hugo Chavez, was a friend of Guyana. He visited here. He described the border controversy as an imperialist ploy, his terminology. And he said that Venezuela will put it on the back burner, again, his terminology. When President Maduro took office, he continued, by and large, that friendship. I don't know how many of you will recall, he came to Guyana. Maduro came to Guyana. We entered into a very beneficial agreement called the Petro-Caribe Agreement with Venezuela, whereby we were trading our rice for their oil. What has changed so drastically to move us from goodly neighbors, though we had that controversy hovering over us, to a state now where the existential threat is so close and direct? And when you look at when the activism really begun over the past few years, it coincides with the finding of large deposit of oil on the shores of Guyana. that is when this latest, highly escalated expression of this controversy first arose, when that oil discovery was made. And that is why they're saying the Venezuelan vice president, and it is on, you can go and look at it, said to the court that we are plundering their oil blocks, that we have brought the American company ExxonMobil to Guyana to plunder their oil blocks. So there is a direct relationship between this recent rise in the controversy and the economic gains that we are making from our resources. And every time Venezuela speaks, they speak about the oil-rich, the resource-rich Essequibo. Listen to all their language as they're translating it. It is the resource-rich Essequibo. So there is a direct and present correlation between economics, finance, etc. to this controversy.
And I want to add that the question was, how has the controversy impacted our political or economic stability of either country? Kemraj Ramjatan is the leader of the Alliance for Change. He was once vice president in the other government, which mine opposes with all our might, opposed with all our might. But he's here today. Ganesh Mahipal is a member of the People's National Congress and an opposition MP, and he is here today. Politically in Guyana, the opposition parties and the governing party have declared a united front in resisting any claim to any part of Guyana. And so that has had a positive effect on our country. We'll take the next question.
Okay, so
There's a... Okay, so I saw a hand at the back, but I'm recognizing you because you have the microphone in your hand, and then we'll take you at the back afterwards. Yes? Yes.
okay, so I have two questions.
Two questions. Go ahead.
My first one being, thus far, Venezuela has ignored all the legal bindings and laws dealing with the situation. So what does the ruling of the ICJ do? What protection does it give us? What makes it different from the other laws and agreements that have already been instated?
So I'll repeat it for you. It's a frequently asked question. Mr. Ramjatan is not hearing. That's why I'm repeating for you. He says Venezuela seems to have ignored the ICJ and its authority. What makes you think they're going to comply with any ruling regarding the referendum? Is that the question? That was. Yes.
Thank you very much. That's an extraordinarily important question at this time. And the answer would be, quite frankly, I am uncertain as to what they will do. But I'll tell you, Venezuela is going to make a big, big mistake if, when the ruling comes out on the provisional matter, it does not adhere to that court's ruling. As already stated, its conduct is rogue. It is going to be a pariah state, in my opinion, when it does not want to adhere to an organ of the United Nations called the ICJ, when that ICJ automatically it becomes a member of. And it has to, abide by the ruling. It is like, and furthermore, it is important to understand that the court and the United Nations do have certain enforcement procedures about them, about their decisions. Their decisions can be enforced by the Security Council, another organ of the United Nations. And the Security Council can do certain coercive things in relation to non-compliance and non-adherence to judges of the ICJ decision. And I believe also that apart from all of that, the enunciation that will come from the OAS and ECLAC and CARICOM and even the United Nations itself is going to make Venezuela literally so isolated. Then of course, powerful countries like America will want to probably go on with sanctioning Venezuela. And I think all of those comprise that gamut that could now be to Venezuela's detriment if it does not abide.
Can we have a mic test here?
Mic test.
Use the other mic for now.
Indeed, I believe we cannot speculate in terms of what Venezuela will do. I do know is that there are enforcement mechanisms in place which the same United Nations to ensure that they, as far as possible, comply with the orders of the court. And that is why, if you notice again, the cooperation, we went to the court and we asked the court to issue urgent orders to ensure that they do not act. Because there's, I would say, every likely possibility that the people will say, what concerns us would be the next steps. And so we have asked the court to stop them, to prevent them from acting on that referendum and attempting to take our Essequibo. There are mechanisms in place. There is a Security Council. Plus, we believe we have strong neighbors and, strong partners, I should say, who will stand with us. And they will be isolated. They will be isolated if they make the mistake to breach that order of court. And I, like every Guyanese, I'm hoping that the court makes a ruling and a pronouncement soon, because I believe that will also act as a deterrent to any mischief which may be planned.
So as I said, Venezuela is a sovereign nation, and Venezuela, I suppose, can feel that it can do as it likes. Every human being living in a society can hold that view, that you can do what you like. But there are consequences. There are consequences that would flow from when one wants to do what one likes. And that is what we'll have to hold here. Both Kemraj and Kim have referred to the enforcement capabilities of the court in relation to its orders. The UN Security Council has at its disposal the armed forces of very powerful countries. The government of Guyana is working night and day in building strategic alliances with countries both in the region and extra-regionally to ensure that we have the type of support that we will need should the situation escalate in a particular direction. We have very powerful neighbors right here who have expressed their solid and unwavering support to us. Brazil is a mighty country and so far have spoken very strongly in support of Guyana. The entire CARICOM is on our side. So, while I can't sit here and say that I believe that Venezuela will obey any order, what I will tell you is what any rational mind will tell you, that if they refuse to obey the orders, well, there are going to be consequences. And those consequences will vary depending upon the type of actions they decide to take. You have soft actions. So the actions that result from Venezuela will determine proportionately the response that will meet those actions. And that's all that we can say at this point in time.
I also think it's a good time for me to remind you that in June of this year, Guyana was elected to the United Nations as a non-permanent member to the United Nations Securities Council. This is the premier body internationally for maintaining international peace and security. It's a good piece of information for you at this point. I'll take the question from the back. And I see a hand there and a hand here. So could the mic carriers get ready to distribute accordingly? Yes, sir.
It is evident that Venezuela will disobey the ruling of the ICJ. What measures are put in place to protect the people of Essequibo and those generally in Guyana against a possible physical infiltration of our sovereign border?
So he says if Guyana, if Venezuela disobeys the ICJ, what measures are we putting in place to protect Guyanese in Essequibo and elsewhere? Anil, you take that question.
The question, I didn't hear it. That was...
If Venezuela disobeys the ICJ, what measures are being taken to protect the Guyanese in Essequibo and elsewhere in Guyana?
Well, our army is already on the border. We have troops in Essequibo. We are monitoring the situation very carefully. The commander-in-chief himself, I believe, is in the border regions right now as I speak. Matters of national security obviously can't be disclosed, but the president himself and the government, through many agencies, have repeatedly assured that there is no need to be panicked, to get into any panic mode, that arrangements are in place that will ensure the protection of Guyanese, not only in Essequibo, but across the country.
And I will, at this point, read for you what the Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat, which is the secretariat that pulls together the positions of the Commonwealth of Nations, said. The Commonwealth stands with the government and people of Guyana and with our partners in CARICOM in expressing our concern over questions in the planned referendum. And the Commonwealth continues to stand for the rule of law and reaffirms its firm and steadfast support for the maintenance and preservation of the sovereign and territorial integrity of Guyana, an unobstructed exercise of its rights to develop the entirety of its territory for the benefit of its people. We heard that we have the support of the CARICOM countries. We heard that we have the support of the countries that belong to the body of the Organization of American States, the OAS. We're hearing now that we have the support of the countries of the Commonwealth. We heard from the United Nations. In other words, our friends across the world are standing with us. The people of Essequibo, the people of Georgetown, the people of Demerara, the people of Berbice, they are standing with us on this controversy. They're standing with us to make sure the resolution is as according to the rulings of the ICJ. I would say very clearly then that while questions are important, and that is why we are here, and while you yourself should consider these important matters, that it is important to know that we have the support in every regard of these countries, and that will be taken, I believe, to its logical end. Because Queen's College children are such perfect hosts, we're going to invite the next question from the President's College.
Good morning, panel. My question is to you that in law we learned that silence can amount to agreement or the formation of a legally binding agreement. So can that same principle be applied to Venezuelan silence on the controversy from 1899 up to the point of 1962?
So if because we're on stage and the speakers are that way, we're not hearing you that well. Are you asking if the Venezuelan silence, and you're saying silence sometimes speaks louder than words, and I like that, and you said there's silence on the arbitral award if we think it means something untoward. Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yes. But they haven't been silent, but do the question. So, go ahead.
I don't think that they have been silent. Their contention is that the arbitral award is a nullity. But as I said, once you sign an agreement and you are bound by that process that the agreement enshrines. And the arbitral award is intricately tied to the arbitration agreement signed by Venezuela. And in that agreement, they agreed to bind themselves to the award, the outcome of the arbitration. 60 years after, they come up with this story about it being fraudulent, and still then has not been able to say, where is the fraud? And the allegation stems from a man who wrote it in a letter and who said that the letter must not be opened after he dies. So this man wrote this letter, and 2 years after the man dies, then the letter was opened. And it is in that letter that there is an allegation that this arbitral award was corrupt because some judge misbehaved, took bribe or something. It's like a Nancy story. And obviously you can't question the man who made the allegation, because he conveniently says that this letter that he wrote must not be opened until he dies. So it's like Tales from the Crypt. You know that HBO TV show? Or Tales from the Grave, if you wish. And that's what it is. The other very bizarre thing is that they are alleging that this award is a nullity. Now, you are all bright people. check what the word nullity means. Nullity means that the agreement is completely void. It is completely invalid. That is what a nullity means. But they are not saying anything about giving up the territory that they got from the award. So it's a one-sided nullity. It is only a nullity in relation to what Guyana got under the award. But it is not a nullity in relation to what they got. They got 5 times more than Guyana under the very award. So insofar as the award gave them a huge landmass, the award is valid. But insofar as it says that Essequibo is ours, it is a nullity. It's a crazy argument. Crazy argument. And that is why they can't say it in a courtroom.
I want to say that I have the Geneva Agreement with me here, and the Article 1 clearly states that it is for the practical settlement of the controversy between Venezuela, which has arisen as a result of their contention that this arbitral award is null and void. What was that all about? It was that dead man's memoir stating that it was a fraud. It is that which is the issue. Not that the arbitral award is null and void, but whether there is any element of truth or any validity or cogency or compelling nature of that allegation of that lawyer. And apparently Venezuela now wants to misinterpret this Article 1 to talk about nullity and voidness and all of that. But the court is very well aware of what this Geneva Agreement is all about. And so I think if there is silence on the part of Venezuela, it is a silence that appreciates the fact of the ridiculous nature of their contention.
You are bright students. We can all make allegations. I want you to consider that for a moment. We can all make allegations. But when we reach a court of law, you have to what? Prove those allegations. What is interesting from that story too, because I see it as a Nancy Drew, it's wild. What is interesting is that the persons against whom the allegations were made, those persons have died and also could not defend themselves and still cannot, they're dead. And so when the proof was called, at every stage where they have to be engaged in a formal setting, and so they have to produce the evidence, there has been a failure. And that is why they keep kicking against the pricks. So the commission, failure. We can't prove the evidence. We can't produce the evidence. Good neighbor, same thing. We go on to the ICJ, same thing. Because when you deem that a document which both countries signed an award, when you make that allegation that it was obtained by fraud, you have to prove it. The onus is on the person who alleges must prove. And in a nutshell, they have been unable to prove those allegations. And that's where we are. Still unable to prove those allegations.
I think, yes, that would be a question from Christianberg. PC?
West Demerara.
West Demerara. Oh, welcome, West Demerara. Mr. Hardat didn't tell me you were here, but to the West Demerara Secondary School, I welcome you.
A pleasant good afternoon to everyone. And the question that I would like to direct to the members of the panelists is, what word of advice would you utter to all Guyanese wondering and are afraid of this matter escalating?
What advice would you give to Guyanese who are afraid of this matter escalating?
First of all, to say to every Guyanese that there is a serious matter and every Guyanese should take this matter seriously and must be vigilant. That's the first thing. Secondly, we must not panic. We must not go into a mode of hysteria, as I said last night on a television program. Thirdly, we must not do irresponsible things and say irresponsible things that can escalate the matter further. And specifically, all of us have access to the social media, and we have a tendency to abuse that access, and we publish and republish irresponsible things. We publish photographs, for example, that are taken from other countries, people slain, and we project that as happening in Guyana or happening in Essequibo, and we say provocative things and do provocative things. Those things will not help. And lastly, there are thousands of Venezuelans, or some of them are Guyanese, who have remigrated back to Guyana. I understand more than 80% of the persons who have come over from Venezuela are Guyanese who remigrated there some time ago. But there is still a large number of Venezuelan migrants here. Those people are here to seek a better life. As frustrated as you may become, as angry as you may become, you should not seek to vent your anger by attacking, insulting, or abusing those persons. For all you know, those persons are opposed to the Venezuelan government and are supportive of Guyanese. We have had 1-2 instances and we have nipped it in the bud. But by and large, those persons who are here have been peaceful. And we have a duty under international law to ensure that those people's rights are respected as migrants. We are depending upon international law for our own protection and for our own resolution here. We can't depend upon international law and expect the aid of international organizations to help us when we violate international law and we violate the protocols of international organizations dealing with migrants. So we have to be very mature and very sober and restrained, but be appreciative of the magnitude and seriousness of the dilemma with which we are confronted.
There's a question, so as someone takes the mic to MP Mahi Paul, who would like to make a contribution, there's a question from the Santa Rosa
I just want to make a comment here on that. That fear is genuine. And indeed, what will be required is tremendous leadership from all the leaders of Guyana to neutralize that fear. If you're a student of history, you would realize that in countries that have had their darkest hours, everybody becoming fearful. But it is the leadership, almost Churchillian leadership, that then brings back the bravery and the courage so that people could state, well, look, I intend to be a patriot for this country. And that is what is required, in my opinion, to drive away the fear. It is not going to be easy, but it will take leadership from our politicians, from our leaders in state institutions and all of that, to ensure that the support is given for purposes of the people then being neutralized of that fear so that they can literally Listen to the arguments that we are talking about. Wait on the support from people, our partners and allies all across the world. And rather than bring panic by even further fear. Fear by itself can bring even further fear. And so we don't want to get there. But we will have to provide the leadership. All of us.
Student from Santa Rosa Secondary School, Mr. Simeon Johnson, is asking this. As you know, Santa Rosa is in Region 1 at Maruka, in the sub-district of Maruka, and it's a border school, and Simeon asks, how can children in the schools close to the border be prepared for any eventualities? Should we be concerned about this existential threat of land grabbing by Venezuela? So I would extend, Simeon, the same answer that was given just now. Should you be concerned? Yes. We should all be concerned when anyone ever tries to encroach on any of our rights. Property rights, personal rights, human rights, our national patrimony. We should all be concerned. And we should be alert and we should be vigilant. If we give in to fear, if we give in to panic, then we're not doing what Guyana, what Santa Rosa is known for. We are not using our intelligence. We know now a few things. One, Guyana is right. Two, Guyana has made the right moves. We have gone to an international court to say, could you help us with this question that Venezuela keeps raising? We have approached our partners wide and far. Almost all countries in the world. I asked you earlier to research how many countries there were in the UN. Over 192. How many countries are there in the OAS? I believe 30-something. In the Commonwealth, in the CARICOM states. We have the support of countries around the world in resolving this controversy peacefully. And it's always comforting to have friends who are wedded to law and order, who have evolved into civilized nations themselves, and who refuse to disturb their peace with wars or conflicts or the disturbance of peace unnecessarily. And so, Simeon, while you are on the border, and while you might not be physically in front of us, I want you to know, as evidenced by no lesser a person than His Excellency's visits to your neighborhood today, that you are forefront in our minds. And we know in the Ministry of Education, in the government of Guyana, we put our children first. You will not be forgotten. You are not forgotten. You will be taken care of. Together, as people and government, all the arms of government, we stand resolute to defend our borders and to claim and own and enjoy what is ours. Mr. Mahipal. Push it up. Sadia? Yeah.
Thank you very much, Minister Manikchan. And I believe the panelists did an extraordinary job in providing us with information in the shortest of time. But there are 2 points that I wish to raise, and perhaps I can ask the panelists to elaborate on the first one, which is during this 1899 arbitral award, the tri-junction point between Guyana, Venezuela, and Brazil was established. And in this award, as AG rightly said, Venezuela got 5 times or almost 5 times that of what Guyana has. And similarly, they lost territory to Brazil. But you don't hear Venezuela fighting Brazil or being a bully to Brazil, but they're coming after Guyana for our Essequibo. And that, I believe, registers clearly that Venezuela is a regional bully and a regional bully to small states. And I believe that is an important point for us to understand, that they are not fighting Brazil, but they want to fight a small nation like Guyana. My second point has to do with the contribution of all of Guyana. And it requires us to participate in the very social media. And instead of us spreading information that can cause hysteria or cause panic, we can unite and share on our social media page the flag of Guyana and demonstrate that we are indeed one people, one nation, one destiny, and 83,000 square miles belong to all of us. Thank you very much.
So I will take one final question now from the Christianberg Wismer Secondary School, all the way from Region 10. So Angel, you have friends here from Region 10.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable ministers, panelists. We all have seen that President Mandela has failed to manage the economical development in his country. So I know he can't manage Essequibo. Nevertheless, how has the controversy between Guyana and Venezuela affected the oil industry?
So she says she sees that as the Venezuelan leadership is unable to manage the economics of Venezuela, so she knows they cannot manage Essequibo. But she would like to know how this controversy has affected, if at all, our oil economy.
Well, as I said in one of my responses, this last and most ecstatic escalation of the controversy directly arose out of the discovery of oil in Guyana. So that's the first point. Secondly, their claim includes, you see, the claim is right now for land, and once that land claim, if they are correct, it has another consequence in terms of sea delimitation and economic zone outside there. Because if you own the land, then you are entitled to the exclusive economic zone immediately adjacent to that land to the extent that the law says, right? Whether it's 20-something miles or whatever it is. So once they're claiming Essequibo, they're claiming everything in the ocean outside of Essequibo. Now that is exactly where the Stabroek Block is. So they are essentially claiming that area where the Stabroek Block is. And if you recall, when we were doing some seismic work, they had arrested a vessel in those waters. It was doing work there for the oil and gas industry. And I believe that there is a line that they have drawn, a 70-degree line out from the land that they are claiming out towards the ocean. And they are saying that Guyana must not pass that line going west. Now that line is exactly where it cuts the Stabroek Block in half. So Exxon, a licensed operator currently, I don't want to say prohibited, it's prohibited because the line is unlawful. The line has no validity. But should Exxon extend its current operations beyond that line, you don't know what the ramifications are going to be. So operations on that oil block is beneath that line so far. And there are other blocks there that They have not been awarded to anyone yet, or they have not become operational. But once they become, there will be an impact, because you don't know for how long they will continue with this inane claim. So it has an impact on the oil and gas industry and its expansion.
Right. So the first question that we got was how Essequibo Guyana's political and economic stability would and could be affected by this controversy. And the last question we got was, you wanted to answer? Okay. But that was it. Yes. But I'll let you wrap up. The last question that we got was this affecting our oil economy? And I think there is a clear line between the two, that this new quarrel, this new claim, this new bullyism, if you will, is directly linked to our new prosperity, with which we will defend with all our might. I ask each panelist for a brief closing remark before I offer mine. The mic. Mic.
We have to stay strong on this issue. Strong at a personal level, strong at the community level, strong at the national level. We also have to ensure that we carry this matter internationally and regionally for support from our allies. And we also have to ensure that we do the necessary resourcing of our institutions, enhancing our diplomacy, enhancing our GDF. And I'm certain that the government is doing all of that so that we can ensure we secure our borders. We have to do lots of work at an educational level to ensure that the school children in the area, the parents in the area, also know that indeed the government and the people of Guyana have their backs. It is very, very vital. And I think the more we do that, and the more we do that at a collective level, as we are doing here, we are going to ensure that Venezuela hesitate before it does any stupid things. Politicians all across the world sometimes can get very stupid things done. And we have to ensure that they must not go there. There must be no irrationality after the decision, because it's that irrationality that could create chaos, and a zone of peace that we all wanted can then become a zone of war. And it has other implications. As a security minister, I know that when chaos reigns, territories within a country like Guyana can become ungovernable. And what happens is that the cocaine dealers, the gold smugglers, the arms traffickers, they utilize that space to do all their mischief, trafficking in women and all kinds of things. And that is too dangerous a consequence to end up with. So let us all be united in this and not one blade of grass. Thank you very much.
I want to echo those sentiments. I do not believe fear, hysteria would assist us in any way. We all know when we become fearful, how useless. We all know this. That's human nature. And I know that it is easy to allow fear to control you. But you know, even on your play field, you're a little older now, but growing up, how bullies operate on the playground. They want to keep you in fear so they could exert control over you. I want us as Guyanese to try our best to replace fear with our faith. Our faith in the fact that Guyana has done everything lawful to manage this situation. Faith in the fact that there is a United Nations Security Council. Faith in the fact that there is a court which this matter is before. Faith in the fact that we have allies and we have friends who are supporting us in this matter. And I want to close with this. There is a large cross-section of Guyanese who believe in the value of prayer. Don't let's forget that. Who believe in the value of prayer. I notice there's a National Day of Prayer, which is coming up. Those of us who believe in the importance of prayer, do not let us forget our spiritual strategy. So let us do not allow fear to control us. Let us have faith and move forward as Guyanese, knowing that we will not back down. We will not give up one jamoon. Not a drop of water in a Pomeroon. Not a blade of grass, Guyana. I thank you.
Permit me to thank you once again for making this engagement possible. You have allowed us to address all the important issues relative to this matter, or most of them, and you have been an outstanding audience. You have asked us some very probing questions that have given us the platform to delve into very crucial issues that need to be ventilated. As you are aware, this program is being streamed right across the country. And the whole purpose of this exercise is to bring public awareness on this issue. I sincerely hope that we have achieved that objective and that you leave here with a much greater understanding of the issues and the events that may or may not unfold and their consequences in relation to this matter. And that you will disseminate that information widely. We may not be able to speak to every single person, but the information which has been imparted here in this discussion is information that every single Guyanese is entitled and should have available to them. You are bright people, you are great communicators, you have your own social groupings. Please, over the next few days and weeks, make the theme of your discussion or part of the theme of your discussion issues surrounding this controversy. Make sure that this becomes a staple in your daily interactions, because when we say that Guyana is under threat, it is not only the physical territory that is under threat, it's all of us who are under threat. And we need to understand that and treat that with the seriousness that it deserves. Lastly, on behalf of our government, or your government, I want to assure you that no stone is being left unturned, no effort is being spared. Every conceivable and possible options and actions that are available that will protect Guyana and Guyana's best interest and its people are being pursued and will continue to be vigorously pursued. Essequibo is ours. Thank you.
Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan, Mr. Kim Kite Thomas, Mr. Mohabir Anil Nandlall, I thank you for your invaluable contributions today and for your very prompt and willing attendance with very late notice. As I speak of late notice, I want to recognize in a special way Sir Riaz Rupnarain. Sir Riaz Rupnarain, is he here? Who yesterday at 3-something saw me and asked me if this session could be had to benefit his students who are doing law and geography. I want to thank you all for coming. I recognize in a special way the schools across the country who hooked up in their smart classrooms, to recognize the Guyana Learning Channel led by Ms. Anisha Mohammed, to recognize the MISU department who are here and made sure we were connected, and to recognize and thank each and every one of you who we believe now have a duty, to one, go and further your research on this issue, and two, speak about it in every sphere, your kitchen, with your neighbor, with your groups on TikTok and Insta and Facebook, although I hear that's now for the old people, and what else? And on all the social forums, because Guyana belongs to all of us. All of Guyana belongs to all of us, and we ain't giving it up. I thank you, and God bless you all.